Growing a business is hard, but it does not have to be. Once a week, we take a break from the hustle and bustle in business to talk about innovations and what's new in the C-suite. This is the Fractional C-suite Retreat, and I'm Joseph Frost. Pull up a seat at the fire, grab a drink, smoke a cigar, and just join me as we relax, learn, and get inspired. This retreat is sponsored by your CMO, helping organizations grow with better marketing strategy. Welcome. I'm excited for today's guest. She's a serial entrepreneur, executive coach, and best-selling author. We're going to talk about lots of things related to offboarding, a topic that I'm really excited about sharing today with our audience. But before we begin, I want to welcome Michelle Hecken. And Michelle, I want you to answer the question, what is one thing that you think C-suite leaders should be thinking about these days that maybe they aren't currently?
Wow, there's a lot of things that come to mind. Let me pick one. I think what's really important as we're seeing all these shifts in the workforce, I mean, I hear it more often than not. I can't find good people. People don't want to work today. And there's a shift in how we run our businesses. And most of us have been taught to work a certain way, to conform to certain expectations. And it's called work-life balance, work being first, for a reason. But newer generations coming in aren't looking at the workplace the same way. And it's not that they don't want to work. Everybody innately has a need to contribute. We just don't really understand yet well enough as leaders how to engage these people with clarity. These people don't want tasks thrown at them. They want to be part of the bigger picture. They want to see what their contribution contributes to. And I think that is one thing that leaders, when we're hiring people, when we're growing and scaling our companies, instead of complaining that nobody wants to work anymore, which, I mean, let's face it, we all hear that. And it's just because we don't know. And when we focus on giving agency and accountability and ownership, it's a whole different level of engagement that we can get. And I think that's the number one thing that my clients are struggling with, that I hear from entrepreneurs in EO worldwide almost every day.
Yeah, it's so true. I have 4 kids, and they're all in that age where they're going to work, and they've been going to work for a while. They're post-college, and they're, the advice I give them is, as dad, and then the conversations I have with them as a parent, it's different than me growing up. Like, there weren't thoughts around, I want a company that, I care about, that I have a shared values and mission statement. Like, you don't have those conversations when you're first starting your job, your career. When I was growing up,
yeah.
Now that's like the first thing they look for.
Yeah.
They want to find companies that they're excited to work for, that they share the mission and the values, and then they want life work balance. To use your
yes,
It really is about how does this. They're putting their lives first.
Yes.
And many of them.
As they should, but we've grown up to be told, no, your life comes second, and we can't wrap our brain around it.
Yeah. And it creates some friction, or if you don't understand it, if you're not aware of it when you encounter it for the first time. I think many of us have been encountering it for years now, but it is different, and it's hard to understand and manage and flip the perspective to theirs as a leader. But once you do, then, okay, how do you use that and leverage it and really make it be more productive than the past? And that's where you shine, I think.
Absolutely. And so the thing is, when we as leaders have clarity about what our contribution value is, meaning I know the value of an hour of my time as an entrepreneur, and then I can focus on creating value in the business and own that. Then I'm going with the example of servant leadership, of working in my superpower, and I build a culture that attracts those people because you're willing to give responsibility and agency. And look, I just had a conversation the other day with a young person who's starting their first 9-to-5 job, super smart, marketing degree. And I was really stunned at the questions, because we build this up as if this generation is like, oh, they're lazy, they don't want to work, blah blah blah. And his question is like, what do I do? How do I fit in? How do I make sure I do everything right? And what attracted him most to the opportunity is the learning. Opportunity to learn, getting paid courses, getting things, being able to build their knowledge and make a contribution. Those were the kind of questions I got. And that's a stark contrast to what we think these young people think. And I feel like leaders need to do a better job. And one way to do that is to stop delegating tasks and to stop looking at people. It's like, hey, I'm going to give you something to do, without actually explaining how that fits into the annual plan, how that fits into the goals, and why those KPIs are important. And stop micromanaging people, because when we give people tasks, we end up micromanaging them because we still have the ownership. And that's why I created the art of offboarding, to kind of bridge that gap so that we can give proper agency and accountability, work on our business, and have a team. Because here's the thing, we can't have a self-running business if we don't have self-running teams, bottom line.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the word agency. Can you explain to me what that means to you?
Yeah, it means ownership. Basically, you are the master, mistress, person. I don't even know how to say that anymore, but the saying, the master of your domain, right? You own it. Okay. If you're responsible for an outcome, a whole outcome that contributes to the value in the company, then you know that you're making a difference. And people want to make a difference. They do. We all do. We all show up in our own ways and want to make a contribution. And it just doesn't fit anymore very well how we used to make contributions and how those contributions were rewarded to how it is now. And people want accountability, agency, ownership, really.
Yeah. And what does that mean in practice if someone has agency versus not agency? What does that look like?
One of my favorite things to talk about. Thanks for that question, Joe. Yeah, what does that look like when somebody has agency versus when they don't? So as a leader, we're always told work on your business, not in your business. You need to delegate more. If you're running EOS, it's delegate and elevate, which is fantastic. Except we have given the word delegation the wrong meaning over time. And that's why I changed it to offboarding. I come from the language industry, words matter. And I knew if I keep talking about delegation, people are going to keep doing the same thing. So how is this different? When we give somebody an entire responsibility, including the ownership, and define the outcome, we can coach them, we can give them the opportunity to ask questions, so that they understand from start to finish, you own this. This is when it's due, right? And people know how to do that. When we're in university, we get a paper and this is what needs to be done. And you have ownership and agency to finish it on time or not. And there are consequences, obviously, right? Accountability. In a business setting, if I have a project due that I'm responsible for, and there's parts of the project that I don't like doing, I'm not good at it, I'm procrastinating, maybe I don't know where to start, but other parts of the project, okay, I'm working along, I'm coming close to my deadline, and I'm realizing I'm never going to make this. What do? I start giving out portions of that project to other people, not on purpose from the get-go, but out of necessity and lack of time. So what am I doing now? I'm giving somebody a piece of a pie or a piece of this project that, yes, they have ownership over that piece. But how can you have ownership over a small piece if you don't see the whole thing? It's like writing a paper and saying, hey, you go write this paragraph and it better be good. And I'm late, so hurry up. It doesn't work. Versus saying, here's the entire project. From the get-go, strategically decide, is this something that I should be taking on? as a leader? Is this worth the value of my time? And what kind of value am I creating in the company? And am I the right person to do this? Instead of always saying yes and then giving people piecemeal, and bring people a challenge. Say, here's the project, start to finish. Here's what the impact of it is. Here's the outcome. Are you okay to do this? And then own it. It's very different from giving little pieces of something to somebody else.
And when you don't own it, if you don't have agency, then what does that look like?
I'm going to explain that from both sides. So if I'm the leader and I am delegating tasks off my desk, it feels great because let's face it, we're working sometimes 60, 80 hours a week and we're busy and we have this urgency to bring the business forward. So I'm working on all these things and I'm like, frazzled. And eventually this project on my desk has been sitting there and I give it to somebody. It's like, okay, that feels good. I didn't like doing that anyway. Whew, freedom. Awesome. Now I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to give somebody else something. I still own all of those projects, right? It's still my deadline. It's still my work. I'm just giving them to somebody, but not strategically thinking about it. I'm doing it out of necessity. So for me, what happens as the leader? I'm like, first of all, oh, this is awesome. Now I can do more of this. And then we do more of it. And then we wake up one day in the middle of the night and we can't remember who we gave what project to, what deadline it was for. Do they have questions? And you're getting all stressed out because you own it, but you're not doing it. And then what do you do next? You go to that person and you start micromanaging on purpose. But it goes something like this. How's that project going? Like you know, it's a deadline and how far are you? And do you need any help? And sometimes we take the work back, right? So let's look at the flip side. What does that look like for the person you just gave a task to? One, of course, they're going to do their best, but they don't have the big picture. They don't know how it all fits in. They don't know the urgency, the impact. They know this one thing that you need it done as their leader. Then after a while, you come back and you say, how's that going? Maybe we should do this. Let me see what you have so far. And do you need any help? And it's under the guise of, oh, I'm such a great leader. Let me help you. But how do you think that person feels? Because as a leader, I've just told them, I don't trust you. I don't trust that you're going to come to me when you're stuck. I don't trust that you're going to do this well. And I don't trust that you're going to do it on time. Basically, you're telling him, I don't believe in you, even though you're not doing it on purpose. But that is honestly what the person might hear. You keep doing that and you get disengaged people.
Yeah, I can see that. And I've encountered that. I've done that. I've been that.
We've all done that. I've done that. That's how we learn, right? I wouldn't know this if I hadn't done it.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you find, it probably, my thoughts are around the person that you delegate to or you offboard to and their capabilities to actually own it versus not able to own it. How do you discern between when somebody's ready to be offboarded to versus delegated to, or is it just one and the same and it's just a conversation that you have to put it into context?
No, it's a great question and it's a very important question. The first step where it starts is with the leader. The leader needs, whether it's the CEO or the COO or a middle management, the leader needs to know exactly what they're offboarding and why.
And is there it's kind of a cascading list of things, right? Small, correct, medium, big. At what point do you have to offboard a task or offboard a project or offboard a whole like quarterly priority? Like those are different things that, when is the ownership clearly delegated or designated and when it's not. And it is somebody just being a team member providing a piece of the puzzle to the owner. Because I think there's got to be some give and take there, right?
Absolutely. And you can't just abdicate responsibilities either, right? So it's a very, very good question. It starts though with the clarity of the leader. Okay, so if I know, okay, here's what I want to accomplish. This is my annual plan. These are my rocks or goals, whatever system you use and want to call them for the next 3 months. Here's what needs to be done. Okay, so what is the value of my time? if I'm running a $5 million company and I'm working 60 hours a week, approximately, the value of my time is about $1,600 an hour. It's not what I'm paying myself. That's my revenue. But that is how much value I need to create with my time. And I've always done that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a $5 million business, right? But if we know that, then why are we working on things that maybe you could pay somebody else $50 an hour for, right? Or $100. And sometimes it's even $300, and people are like, oh no, I'm not going to pay somebody $300, but it's a fraction of what your value to the company could be if you use that time differently. So clarity about what am I taking on? What is my team taking on? And then being clear on which responsibilities have the highest value to your company, give you the biggest return on your time. And then you look at what can you get off your plate. So when I do this with clients, and by the way, owners, entrepreneurs almost never have a job description. So we don't even know what's on our plate. So getting clarity around that and getting clarity about what energizes me, what's a great use of my time, and what is not. And when we do that on every level of the organization, now we are delegating strategically, which is offboarding. I am thinking about it first, and I am making a conscious strategic decision who I want to give this to. And it's not about giving it to somebody. Yes, as you said, the conversation, but also having that conversation with the person. Okay, which of these do you love doing? And what do you not? And finding the right person, because sometimes we feel guilty giving projects to other people because we don't like doing them. And then it feels like we're giving them our trash, but that's not true, because there are a lot of people who love doing exactly that. Find out what that is. If we can get people working 80% of the time on what they love doing, the productivity soars. We have amazing people. We have a fantastic culture. That's what agency does. But you have to think about it before you start, not in the middle of a project.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, the delegating and elevating concept that kind of has been made popular through EOS is exactly what you're talking about. However, it's the method to do that, which is more strategic with offboarding. It's prioritized, it's intentional, and then there's a methodology to the offboarding of that item that you're delegating that has an end product of agency for the person that's receiving that task or that project or that priority. And then when that is done properly through offboarding, then the person truly owns that responsibility, and you truly are freed up then as a leader to go on to the next area of import to you. Is that a summary of it?
Absolutely. And it's funny. So in the business that I had for 25 years that I sold in 2019, I sold for a higher multiple. I got an all cash deal, walked away after 3 months. Why? Because my business ran itself. Now, I was lucky because scarcity sharpens the mind. I had a global business with a fax machine on day one. Okay. At a time in 94 when only big businesses did business internationally and globally, right? So I had translators in different countries. I had project managers in different countries, in different time zones, clients in different time zones. So I had no choice but to give people agency, right? I fell into it. If I didn't want to be up 24 hours and answering every phone call and answering every question that either a client or a team member had, I had to give them agency. I had to build those systems. I had to give them accountability. And because I had to, I did it and it worked, and I learned from that. So I was lucky that I was in that situation, and my business was completely remote across cultures, across time zones, across languages. And that is, you can't run a business like that when you're micromanaging everybody. And ideally, that's how businesses should run. I mean, when I hear people saying, oh, I have to move my mouse every couple of minutes so that people see that I'm working on Teams, I'm like, oh my goodness, that seems horrible to me. Give them an outcome and let them do their thing. And I've done it for 25 years. It works like a charm. I worked 4 to 10 hours a week on my business, doing what I loved, which was meeting with some clients, strategic growth, innovation, those things. But my business ran itself. So that is what the agency does. And yes, you've summarized that. It's the forethought instead of it being an afterthought.
And then how much of the effectiveness is based on the person versus the process to gain that agency in others? Is it certain people can never be true owners of things, or does the process make anyone a true owner of that item? Or is it a nice combination?
I think it can. Wow, that's a very interesting angle that you're looking at. I think it can when we are clear what that person's superpower is and what isn't. And then we make sure that we put that person in the seat where they're in their superpower. Because if I'm always, kind of not sure about what I'm doing, or I have 50% of the stuff on my plate is stuff that I don't like. And let's face it, when we apply for jobs, first of all, the employer makes it look amazing and fun, right? Because we want people to apply. And then it looks fun for people, and then they apply. Okay, great. Let's take marketing, for example. I love marketing. I want to go into marketing, and I'm finding a marketing job. And you know this because, you're in the marketing industry. So then it's like, okay, cool. Oh, this job looks great. I'm going to apply. And then you find out much later, because it's offboarding actually also starts in the interview process. And I'll get to that because we so often work with generic job descriptions. But what happens is then they find out marketing isn't fun and branding and creative and throwing out ideas all day like in Mad Men. No, it's 80% admin and work and those kind of things. And they're like, oh, I don't like that. Oh, okay. Well, there's a part of marketing that has that creative part, and there's a part of marketing that doesn't. And there's different parts. So knowing clearly what it is makes a difference. And like when you fill roles for people, either as fractional, if the CEO or the owner, the entrepreneur doesn't really know what they want that person for. I mean, they kind of know. And then they pull a generic job description, and then you probably go in and ask them a million more questions because the generic job description does nothing. Often all they really want is help, but they don't know exactly what they need, right? So having that clarity beforehand from the leader to say, okay, this is what I want to offboard. And offboarding means it's gone. You're not taking the responsibility back. You are coaching and training somebody else or hiring somebody else for that responsibility. It's not delegating them and take it back. It's not yours anymore. And then you have absolute clarity, and you can hire with that much more. You can be much better at finding the right person and ask the right questions instead of saying, here, this is marketing. These are the outcomes. This is what you want to do. But then, I need somebody who needs to love doing this, and this. Do you love that? You can ask that in the interview question so that you don't get somebody in that job that 60% of the time is doing stuff they don't love.
Yeah. You talk about the interview process to find the right role. I think what I'm hearing is much more important is the interview process to define what's being offboarded. Because I think many times when people think about delegating and elevating or offboarding, they're not very clear in their own minds what needs to go and what needs to stay.
Yeah, and why? And why?
Absolutely. We work as fractional CMOs with business owners that want to offboard the marketing leadership. We also work with business owners and then executives that want to offboard some executive talent, executive assistant type work to VAs and EAs. And in both scenarios, I encounter a lot of confusion with what the person receiving the role or doing the job is. As a fractional CMO, we think this is what the leader wants us to do. or as an executive assistant, this is what we think that we need to do to support that leader. And then the leader has completely different ideas 3, 6, 9 months later. Like, no, I didn't want you to do that. I wanted you to do this. And that's not well documented often, or not documented enough. And when it's not, there's real friction and problems in that engagement because of it.
Absolutely. And EAs, I mean, I see leaders do this all the time. They work with an EA like an EA is a task rabbit. And then they wonder why their mental load is still up here. Because when we don't give ownership and responsibility and agency, we're thinking about it all of the time. And our mental load grows and grows and grows. And we only have so much capacity in a day to make decisions. When our mental load gets heavier, we make worse decisions. We get more burnt out, right? So if I'm using my EA to give tasks to, I'm basically micromanaging them. Versus, and I think the EA, and we've talked about this before a little bit, should be one of the most empowered team members to support you. An EA who doesn't have agency to hold you accountable, you're not using them right. And it's often because we don't know. We think EAs, oh, okay, well, I can book my own travel and I can, it's not a big deal. I don't need an EA. You've probably heard it a million times. I've heard it a million times. And that's not what an EA is about. So the problem is a lot of times leaders don't really know, or they hire from a should. Should I hire an EA? Well, my friends have an EA. Instead of looking at what is my time worth? What contribution am I making? How do I want to grow my business? And what are the things that are taking time away from me doing that, right? Because if I have to bring in $1,600 of value, and it's not really true because we haven't accounted for gross margin, but let's just say, because it's actually twice that if you're operating on a 50% gross margin. But regardless, if you're bringing that in, how much value are you creating? And now you can start thinking about where your focus is. When you're clear on your focus, now you have a list of all of the things that you want to offboard, many of which you don't like doing anyways, many of which you do, but they're not worth your time. Now you can give agency to your EA. Now you can say, here are the things, or you can offboard to different team members, and you can hire the right person because you know what you want, instead of just saying, I need a something.
Yeah. So I'm working with this challenge right now with some of my fractional CMOs that want to grow their practice to become $1 million firms. And they're successful fractional CMOs. Have got 2 to 4 clients. They're generating 300, 400,000 a year, and they know that they're maxed out. They can't go any further. They're at their personal limit of doing fractional CMO work. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things I've been coaching them around is you're not going to get to the next level if you don't hire an executive assistant. And the answer I get is, I know, but I don't know what I would have them do. And there's the gap. Like, I know, but I don't know. So how does offboarding solve that challenge and help really build that role for an EA with the ability to then offboard it with agency to an EA?
Yeah. Well, a couple steps. The first step and the observation is that most entrepreneurs don't have a job description because we've built the business from the ground up and we know how to do things, and we look at our plan and we make up what we think we should be doing. And there's nothing wrong with that, except when we're looking to hire, how do we tell somebody what we want them to do if we're changing our minds on what we're doing every week, every month, every quarter? Okay. So the first step I do when I work with clients, we write down everything that the entrepreneur or CEO does, even if they have a job description, if they're a hired gun. Because let's face it, you get a job description, when do you ever look at it again? If you do an annual review, maybe. Otherwise, you never look at it again. So write down everything that is on your plate. If you're grabbing coffee for the team, write that down too, because that is all your time. And that's the only non-renewable resource that we don't have. Then think about, okay, take a highlighter and say, what do I love doing? And what of all the things on my plate do I really not like doing at all? Mark it red. And then look at it and say, and this is a process. Obviously, I have templates for that, and we go through that, but really get that clarity and then say, okay, of the things that I love doing, where's the value? Is it really high value for the business? Is it worth my, say, $1,600? Will it bring $1,600 in return if I do this? And having that clarity and delineation. So we're talking EA, but when you're COO or CMO, a number two, like really on your executive team, you're going to butt heads because these are high performers that you're working with. And if you don't know what you're doing and you keep coming in and asking them and changing your mind, it's not going to work very well for your business and you're not going to scale as fast. So get that clarity first. And then from the things that you want to offboard, that's your job description. The things that are important but not worth your time, they will bring the business forward. And by the way, in that audit, I can usually clear up 10 hours a week for clients. And they're like, wow, 10 hours I have now every single week to work on my business and create that value. Wow. And on average, we go from 60 to like 20 or 30 hours a week when we do this exercise all the way through and then offboard it and implement it. But it's really not hard to find that time if we can just have clarity and sit down and let go. And then we know what kind of an EA or VA do we need, right? Do I need somebody who's really amazing at marketing because I hate posting and I'm doing it every day? Do I need somebody who has financial knowledge because that's a thing that is important, but I don't want to do? How do we know to hire that right person with the right skill if we don't know what we're asking them to do?
So let's unpack that a little bit. So you've got the things that you love to do on your list that you've highlighted. And some of those things you've identified as being value producing, worth your time because it's revenue generating. But some of those things you love to do might not be.
Correct.
And are you suggesting to stop doing those things that you love to do?
Sometimes.
Or just be aware of them and do less of them, or just accept that those are taking away from value producing time?
It depends what they are, right? If there's something that you love doing that is of low value for the company, please let it go, because that's time you could be spending with your family. That's time you could be talking to clients. That's time you could grow your business, right? And I get it. As entrepreneurs, we want to have all of the things that energize us, because if our energy goes down, guess what? Everybody's energy goes down. So we want to make sure we're working on the stuff that we love. Now, is it going to be 100% stuff that we love? No, there's going to be in the red column things that we're really happy to see go. But some of them might be high value and we might not be able to let them go right away because we don't have anybody for that yet. So then we hire strategically or find the strategic right person for that. But if there's a green that you love doing, if it doesn't take much time, maybe it's low value, but it only takes an hour a week, but you really, really love it, fine, keep it. It's your time. But if you're looking to grow your business and create value, then yes, you wanna get rid of the green things that have low value unless they bring you exceptional joy. So it's not just revenue. You said, does it contribute to revenue? It's not just revenue. We can create value different ways, right? When we look at the line items in our P&L, just because something's in the expense column doesn't mean it doesn't contribute to the bottom line. Right? If I'm investing in AI, let's say, and having somebody build my company brain and I have to lead that, I don't maybe love doing that, but it's of high value, but it will contribute to net profit. So I would like to talk about value versus revenue because that's a little bit too easy.
Yeah. Okay. So there are things that you love to do that may not provide business value, whether it be revenue or profit or margin. But if it's limited to acceptable acceptable uses of your time, you may recommend keeping those items. But if it's more time then it could be taken away from free time with family, or could be just not valuable time and taken away from opportunities for growth for the business. Those are the things that you would say, we know you love these things, but there's a lot of time required in doing them. You should consider offboarding those items. So that's where you would have a conversation with somebody
Correct.
to distinctly determine what to keep and what to not keep. Now, the things that I heard you say are in red that you do not like doing, you have that same approach. It's some of these things are of high value to the business. And even though you do not like them, you have to be very strategic about offboarding them, because they may be requiring certain skill sets that you can't easily offboard to
Right.
finance.
Like, exactly, like hiring a CFO, right? If you know you need to hire a CFO and you don't have anybody in your company right now, well, you're going to have to keep doing it for a while, but now you know that this has to come off your plate and you can take action.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a great first step, right? You got your green, red, everything you do, high value, low value, high time, low time. So you build your set of, all right, here's my things that I've agreed I want to delegate to someone else. I can build my job description around that. Then how do you get agency when you ultimately hire somebody or delegate those items to someone through an offboarding methodology versus just, here's my list of things I want you to do them.
Right. Because they're grouped as a responsibility with associated tasks to them, right? Like when we write a job description, we'll say, okay, whatever, account reconciliation, credit card statements, whatever. Those are, the tasks, but there's a responsibility associated with it that those things fall under. So that's also a massive difference between delegation and offboarding, because with offboarding, we already categorize the entire responsibility. We don't delegate or offboard a task. So it's easy for it to become a job description. And then it's agency because, and here's what we haven't talked about in my offboarding blueprint, what's the KPI associated with it? Because we can't just abdicate, right? We need accountability. And with agency comes accountability. And we have to give them a way to be accountable other than us micromanaging people, right? So along with each responsibility in the spreadsheet that we use, we're also looking for KPIs. Now, as CEOs or entrepreneurs, do we have KPIs? No, our team does. Some of us do, but most of us don't. And that's okay. But when we're offboarding it, we need to think about how am I going to measure this when somebody else takes it over? So we have to ask ourselves, which line item does it affect? Okay, it's an expense, but does it contribute to net profit? You really have to look at where it's going to land and understand the value of it. And then you can offboard the responsibility with a meaningful KPI. Because when we talk about building a business that runs without you, as I said earlier, you have to have self-running teams and you have to have systems and you have to have KPIs in place. If you don't have those, you're playing Russian roulette and you're not helping people either, because we want to know, how are we going to get measured? How does this, and we do it as entrepreneurs. We measure ourselves against our goals. How far have I gotten? Did I hit my revenue? Did I hit my net profit? Everybody's the same. So make sure there's a KPI associated with it. Clear KPIs bring agency, bring accountability to agency.
Yeah. So thinking about the role of an executive assistant, what are some of the KPIs that you've seen make sense in those roles?
It's a little bit different for executive assistant with KPIs, but also not. So you wouldn't have your walk KPIs the same way as you would for a senior manager or for a C-level executive, right? Because they're driving revenue. We always want KPIs to be in that person's control, right? So I think that's a really important point, that I hear often, oh, I need a KPI for that. What KPI should I put in there so that I can measure the outcome? Great. But the KPI has to be in that person's control, right? If I have an EA and I say, okay, I'm going to tie this KPI to revenue, let's just say, that's a really hard thing to do. I mean, yeah, okay, if she finds you more time, you can get more revenue, but she's not in control of what you do with your time. So make sure the KPIs match. And with an EA, one, SOPs, right? We got to document everything. But what I do with my EAs, I share our goals, our annual goals, our quarter. I share them with everybody in the company, always have. But with the EA specifically, be honest. What do you want from them? For me, one of the things is when I have stuff on my plate that I don't necessarily love doing, that I only can do, keep me accountable. Don't let me get away with it. Help me say no, right? Maybe it's a fun list. Maybe it's like, maybe the KPI is to help you make sure once you've offboarded and you've freed up 10 hours of your week, to not fill them again with stuff that's not supposed to be there. So maybe it's a KPI about the calendar. I need to maintain those hours every single week, and it's your job to help me make that happen. I can easily measure that. I can see how many hours are free, and it's absolutely in her control. So the KPIs, I think, are often misunderstood have to be something really big. They just have to be representative of the outcome you want that's under that person's control.
Yeah. I think it is certain roles. It's difficult to develop those good KPIs because a lot of their role is not, it's kind of subjective in nature or hard to put a metric to. And right. Certainly EAs are often doing a hodgepodge of things for an executive.
Yeah.
And it's hard to identify, what those metrics might be to measure everything well. I know with my executive assistant, my primary value from her is managing my calendar. And some people are like, why can't you just use a calendar link? Well, I can. But what happens to me is if I have to go back and forth with you on a calendar link, then I got to click the link, then I got to look at my calendar, then I've got to select. It's 15 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I spend, 10 people want to book with time with me every day. So for me to just copy my executive assistant and say, Clarissa, can you please find time to meet with Michele? It's immediately off my head, and I trust she has her completely to get that booked, and it does get booked. So one of the things that I've recently realized is that things are getting booked back to back to back to back to back too many times. So I don't have any breath. Like seriously, like 8 back-to-back meetings with 0 time in between is not healthy. So one of the things that I need to do with her is explain, I want you to own making sure I have a breath. I want you to be always looking at my calendar, making sure that I've got 15 minutes every 2 hours to just take a breath. And then a KPI around that. Did I have 2 hours a day in breath time? Would be an exactly, great tactic or a great KPI to measure her performance to meet my expectation that she has complete control over.
Agreed. I would up that one. So to me, ideally, I don't have to tell my VA or my EA that she has to book that meeting because she has access to my email. She sees my calendar. She knows which meetings I have. So for example, while we are on this podcast, without talking to my VA, I know she's already creating a landing page. She's creating a follow-up email because there's an SOP and she understands what's at stake. So I don't even have to say, please book this. She'll see the email. She'll reach out to me and say, hey, do you want me to book something with Joe? By the way, the next 2 weeks are kind of crazy and this deadline is coming up. How urgent is this? Should I book him 3 weeks It's not my mental load. And it comes down to mental load. I don't want to have to say that. I want that off of my plate. The same way magically food appears in the fridge. I mean, that would be my dream, right? Do I want to make a whole list and grocery list and think about it? No, that's the mental load, right? So taking it that bigger notch to say, okay, you have agency, but it's your responsibility to make sure that I have 15 minutes in between, and not just as an SOP. Look at the big picture, look at my calendar, what else is coming up? And because I make promises all the time, I'm getting better at saying no, but typically what do we say? Yes, of course, I'll jump on it. Yes, 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 right? So it makes it way easier for me if my EA comes to me and says, I know you're setting up all these meetings and I know what they're for. Maybe you're spreading yourself a little thin. And in my case, I go to my art studio on Fridays and I paint. And the last couple of months, I have not gone because it was just, you know, while I am the queen of offboarding, now I'm onboarding because I'm building something new. So it's a very different, but I'm building with offboarding in mind. And she will come and she knows, don't book anything on Friday. And if I say, okay, I'm going to open the Friday, she's like, are you sure you haven't gone for the last 4 weeks? Here's what's happening next week. How about, so she's that's agency. Yeah. That's agency.
Yeah, I like that. I have not gone that deep with my executive assistant to open up email, and we've talked about it, but it's almost, there's a hurdle in my mind from the amount of energy and effort it would take for me to train her on how to respond to all my emails, for me to be able to then, like, the offboarding work that you're talking about is the hurdle. Like, I know that to do it properly, you have to have the conversations and put time in with the examples and give iterations and feedback. And that has kept me from taking that next step with my executive assistant in that area.
Makes sense, because it seems overwhelming and it's something we don't like doing. Like, do I now need to go into my admin brain and dissect? And it's easier for me to just do it myself. I hear it all the time.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It doesn't take that long.
How does your offboarding methodology help make that less of a hurdle for an executive?
Well, first of all, my EA, and in my previous company, like, she ran everything. Like, she booked my hair appointments, my nail appointments. She knew how far to space everything and how this would work. And when this event would come up, like, I wouldn't have to tell her. She would see that because she saw my emails. And it's not that hard to do. Number one thing to do is anything that's important that you feel your EA shouldn't see, have it sent to a different email. Because I hear that all the time. Oh, I have my banking statements. Okay. Get another email address and move them somewhere else. They can change your email address. Okay. So now everything in your email is nothing confidential, nothing that, would have some privacy challenges. All right. Deal with that. I have 0 inbox at the end of every week. Okay. And in my former company, that worked, even though a lot of my emails were in German and my EA didn't speak German. So I had to deal with those because she just couldn't. Nowadays, easy. She could have dealt with them because with AI, she would have known exactly what to say and then only sent me the ones that I needed to respond to. So it's not so much about measuring everything, but having them know, okay, Michele is focusing on this. We want to get 10 more clients every month. This is what she's doing. This is where she's focusing her energy. And knowing that if I get pulled out of that flow, I'm going to lose not an hour or 2. I'm going to lose a week because it's going to throw me and it's going to distract me and I'm going to get pulled into different directions. And so she knows that. So it's about having your EA know exactly what's on your plate and why, and having the conversation on how she can help you, or they can help you. Sorry, I'm still I'm saying she because I'm picturing my EA, but we have to be careful. Don't want to step on anybody's toes. I'm just seeing my EA there. And it's just very different from telling the EA what to do all the time. It is really the opposite of the freedom that the EA can actually give you. And so when I trained on the email, okay, so I just had her watch me while I was doing it. We zoomed in. Here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing this. I'm doing it anyway. So I'm just recording my screen while I'm doing it. And then okay, eventually she'll do it and then she'll take over and it's not instant. Offboarding is not instant. That's abdicating. You have to coach and train, but it does not have to be as hard as we make it out to be.
Yeah. I see that with a lot of my business owner friends, EO members, a lot of aspiration for an EA. I want an EA. I want someone to take this load off. A lot of apprehension about allowing somebody else to do some of that stuff that you've always done in the past, and the amount of training and time you would have to dedicate to be able to truly offboard to someone else.
Which is easier today. I mean, if you can do a Loom, you can record your screen while you're just doing it, comment. You can have AI create the SOP from that. I mean, that is the easy part. The harder part, yeah.
I think that's true, but I think that it still causes a lot of apprehension because there's not a clear path or way or understanding of the time commitment to do it. So if where I was going to go with this question is, does your methodology for offboarding solve that challenge for an executive that wants to have an executive assistant?
Yes.
Do you have a framework and a service that walks them through then ending up with a job description and a training offboarding plan that would allow them to more easily bring on an executive assistant with agency that's going to free up the time for them to focus on the things they love and that are most valuable to the organization?
Short answer is yes. That is exactly what I do. And with an EA, it's a little bit different, but not that different to doing it with a COO. It's very, very similar process. It's just that your relationship with an EA is almost more personal, right? Because they know so much more about you after a while. So it's you're opening the kimono farther than you would with a COO, right? But yes, that is exactly the process. And again, it starts with getting the entrepreneur clear on what they need the EA for, not what they think they want the EA for. Because most people that I know use the EA maybe to 10 or 20% of what that EA could be doing for them in their life. And yes, with this methodology, it makes it crystal clear and much easier.
And then when you take that methodology and shift to that C-level load, that's where I get even more excited, because I see a lot of business owners that are wearing too many C-suite hats. It's the on the business, in the business, and now it's on the C-suite, in the C-suite. And too many business owners are in the C-suite. And that's where the fractional world opened up a whole new opportunity that didn't exist, as commonly 5 to 7 years ago. So the idea that you can get out of working in the C-suite by bringing in a fractional, the same problems exist though. How do you truly offboard that fractional role to a fractional that will have agency in it, and it has to be equally determined by both the fractional and the executive what that is, what that clear ownership looks like, and where it needs to, and the KPIs associated with it need to be developed. Yes. That's what we do. We've been doing that for 8 years at Fractional, developing the way to truly allow a senior business owner or executive offboard the leadership of marketing to one of our fractional CMOs. But we still have, areas where it's obviously not been offboarded. It's usually because that's an area that the CMO loves to do, or sorry, the CEO or the owner loves to do. That's that love category.
Yep.
But it's not the most valuable use of their time anymore, but they can't let it truly go.
Exactly. And it's funny. I finished writing my book. I told you I was writing my book. And as I was reading it again, like for the 15th time, I just read it for the final time over the weekend, and it's going to last editing and publishing. But there's a story that I share in that book about Julie, who one of the categories, one of the responsibilities that she needs to offboard, and these are, real client stories, was financial. So she was that person who was in that C-suite, and she looked at how much time she was using for the financial role. And for her, she hated it. But it was trust. Like, these are the finances. She had gone through some crisis and financial challenges over the years in her business. And that's something she wanted to keep close to her chest. And I think a lot of us feel that way, right? And so we identified that it needed to be offboarded. We brought in a fractional CFO. But because we had done the work and she was very, very clear on what she was doing, why it needed to be done, and what the value was, now she could have a conversation with that fractional CFO. And obviously she interviewed quite a few. And once she hired that person, I remember her coming back and saying, not only did I get this off my plate, but the fractional CFO can do it in a third of the time. And it's not just about time. She said, he just saved me so much money because he could see something that I couldn't see because I'm not trained in it. It's not my superpower. We just added $200,000 to our bottom line that I wouldn't have seen, but he saw it. And so it's not just about offboarding what you have on your plate. It's also, I think, where the cool opportunity with the fractional C-suite is that you can also share, okay, these are my blind spots. Here's what I've been doing. Even in the interview process, what other blind spots do you see? What other suggestions do you have? And when you have that conversation, it becomes clear very quickly that that person is way more qualified, faster, and better than doing it. And then you put your things in place. I mean, I used to look every single day. I knew my revenue. I knew my gross margin. I knew my cash flow. Of course, I'm looking at that every single day, but I'm not doing it. And so she unlocked so much value in her company by offboarding it in addition to her time. And what I love about fractionals and what you do is that, I don't know, especially in finance, I mean, yes, they have agency and ownership because it's very clear what they're responsible for. But when the company grows and you need a full-time person, they're going to be your best ally in interviewing because they don't have skin in the game of your company. So they're going to be more unbiased in giving you recommendations. They're not on your payroll. So there's so many advantages to doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the offboarding of the leadership piece is hard for most founders because they've done everything in the business, and some things are easier to give up than others, and it's the things they love that they give up the last. And that's it's something that we understand, and it's an opportunity for us, and we've built our business around trying to make it easier for founders to offboard. But it's still a challenge. And I see that in different disciplines, not just marketing disciplines, sales disciplines, tough, operations or finance is tough. If it's an IT professional, it's hard for them to think about someone else being in charge of the technology of their business.
And there's ego involved too, in all of that, right? Let's not leave human nature out of it, right? There's some ego. It's like, what if somebody else can do it just as well? I'm like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't maybe feel really good, right? When I was translating, and same thing, I know I can translate X amount of words. That's my limit, right? So I obviously then started offboarding translations and trained people. And then I was editing and training, right? But at the end of the day, now I can scale because I can just multiply myself. But it was hard because I'm like, the first I was correcting everything. It's like, I can't send this to my clients. My clients want my quality. Only I can do this. And of course, it's a load of crock. There's millions of amazing translators or put in any profession around the world. So that ego sometimes holds us back a little bit too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been working with a concept called return on leadership. And it's thinking about, when you invest in a leader in an organization, it's hard to necessarily have a clear return on that. Because it's sometimes it's a mid-level leader, or it's a cog in the wheel, or we're not sure what that investment in a leader is. But if you can think about it in opportunity costs, what's your time being that leader take? How many hours a week are you in that role as the leader if you don't have one? And so from a marketing standpoint, if a founder or a CEO is spending 10 hours a week owning the leadership of marketing, or maybe they're only spending 5 because they don't have 10, when they add a marketing leader, whether it's a fractional or full-time, part of the equation is the free time you get back that you then can apply to those other value creating areas. But then part of it is what can that leader do with their time differently? Can they give you more to the bottom line by being if more efficient with the spend, or can they give you more to the top line by being more effective with the lead gen and sales support? And those are the things that go into return on leadership when you're trying to make that decision. Am I going to hire anyone? Am I going to hire a fractional, or am I going to hire full time? You got to take those opportunity costs along with those bottom line and top line results as well.
I love that concept, return on leadership, because it really is. I mean, let's say, just so we can do some really easy math, let's say the value of your time is $1,000 an hour. Okay, now you get back 10 hours a week that you can do something different. That's $10,000 worth of value. I mean, now you can choose not to translate that into value, up to you, but you have that time every single week. That's $10,000 worth of value, where before it was maybe worth $1,000, right? So now that's a return on your leadership by offboarding those things, that you now have that return, that you have the time to generate more profits, to generate more revenue, to build strategic alliances and partnerships, or innovate whatever it is that you're doing. Because when we're burnt out at the end of the day, especially if we're working on stuff that we don't like, where's our creativity? Where's our energy? It's gone.
Yeah. And if you want to take a look at it also from the expense side, so Greg Crabtree's been around EO for a while, talks a lot about the idea of having, smart metrics in your business. And one of the things
we hired him too back then. Yeah.
One of the things I heard him say once is if you're gonna do nothing else but hire $100,000 a year marketing person, or make $100,000 a year marketing spend, you should get 50% of that back in the second year ongoing. So your bottom line should increase by $50,000 a year after that first year investment, inclusive of it the second year. So if you're making $1 million a year, and you make $100,000, your next year or your current year is probably going to go $900,000 because you're making that investment in business. But the next year, the profit should be $1,050,000.
Yeah.
And it should be inclusive of the expense you have ongoing in marketing. And I always had that in mind. So my job is, if I bring a fractional CMO in to an engagement and nothing else changes in that business, in year 2, they should increase 50% of that investment in their bottom line. And that doesn't
That's
include,
a great metric.
Yeah. It doesn't even include what they would earn back by freeing up that time, that opportunity cost. That's just bottom line dollars.
Right. Because even if they have that opportunity cost, marketing may not be their thing at all, and they can focus on something completely different. And now you have a double win. You have a win because you've offboarded and you're getting $50,000 in profit back in the following year. And you have your time to focus and create more value on your time. So it's like a double whammy almost in profit.
Yeah. And when you think about it in those 2-year terms, it's less of an expense and more of an investment, which is back to what's your return on leadership? Because bringing in a marketing leader or a finance leader, an IT leader, operations leader, it's going to be an investment, an immediate drain on the business if you didn't have that person there before. It's a new expense. So you're going to drop your profitability because of that, if nothing else changes, right? If you give that person a year, 2 years, and you haven't seen those results, then it was a bad investment. But if a good leader comes in and makes the changes and adds value, then they should increase the profitability by at least 50% of their annualized salary, or that's a bad return on leadership.
Agreed.
That's the mindset that we try to get our clients to think about. It is an expense, but there is an expectation of increasing the value over time.
Yeah. And like I said, it's an investment, right? It's an investment. I mean,
and offboarding, I think, has a great, if offboarded properly, that investment can be more clearly,
much higher.
Yeah. More clearly understood. The time to value is probably much quicker. And then that additional opportunity cost, that freeing up of time that the CEO or founder gets, it's just bonus. That's
absolutely
all bonus, all upside.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting when you think about it, like typically there's two types of people when, we're in marketing, right? If you're looking at your audience, right? It's either people who have tons of time and no money, or they have a lot of money and no time. And where I think our conversation is also leading to say, why do we have to choose? We can have more money and more time when we build the right team the right way, when we're clear, when we give responsibility and agency, and can have clarity on what the business needs and why. Then we get to have money and time. I don't see why we have to choose. There's a better way to do this.
Yeah. Well, what I've enjoyed about our conversation today is we've talked a lot about a centralized theme of offboarding to give agency to anyone within the organization. And when leaders think about how to get more return on leadership from their team members, I like to say everyone's a leader in the organization, every single person.
Right. We
lead our families, we lead our communities, we lead our departments, we lead our peers. Like, we're all leaders, but we
lead ourselves.
We lead ourselves, and we may or may not be operating to maximize our own individual return on leadership. But part of that is by giving agency to each other in their own areas of leadership. And that's what offboarding allows. One of the tactics that I think people should understand, proper offboarding is going to give more agency and thus more return on leadership for the entire organization.
Exactly. And happier people, better retention, higher productivity. It's all, I love that phrase, return on leadership, because that's what it is. And it's not just for the entrepreneur, it's for the entire organization.
Right. And it's just it's a flip of the typical delegate and elevate onboarding thought process to offboarding. And the responsibility of leadership would be to create offboarding throughout their entire organization so that they can create more agency amongst everyone in the organization, which, as you mentioned, is very important in a remote global workforce, which I have all over my teams, as well with fractional leaders. That concept of offboarding and agency is really critical for an organization to understand and to grow and scale in today's decentralized and distributed workforce.
Exactly. That is a beautiful summary of what it does. Absolutely. It just makes work more fun when you can work 80% of the time on what you love versus only 50% of the time. And then you have to invest energy to kind of get it done when really it could just flow, right? That's return on leadership when you make everybody's lives better in your company, in your family. Because at the end of the day, what is it costing you? Not in money. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can be a billionaire. You still only have one life and you still have finite amount of time. So what is it really costing you for your life, for your stress level, for your health to not be doing this? And I mean, we're not in our 20s anymore, and it lends a different perspective as to what do I want to do every single day with my life, and I want to build the business that runs without me. But you can't do that if your teams don't run without you.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to do a talk and a workshop together to share with other founders and executives on how to increase their return on leadership with offboarding and fractional and outsourcing. I think would be a great
Let's
topic.
do it. That sounds great. And by the way, I work with a lot of EOS companies, and I was actually speaking at their VI Visionary Integrators Summit in Texas last October. And while it seems like it's a contradiction, it actually enhances the flow of EOS, because that piece, especially when you're talking about the visionary integrator relationship or CEO and COO relationship, the clarity that comes is just so beautiful. So even EOS is embracing. And when I speak there, I start with stop delegating, and they know that, and they laugh because I'm not contradicting what they're saying. I'm just shifting the paradigm a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's do that. That sounds great, Joe.
Great. Well, we'll work on that. And I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And I love conversations with you because we go deep and we can learn from each other. And I always come up smarter and wiser because of it. So thank you so much for your time and energy.
Well, thank you for having me, Joe. And right back at you when you said centralized. I don't know what you said, but I remember the last podcast that we did where we talked a lot about centralized leadership. And I so enjoy talking to you and exploring what's possible together and just building better businesses and helping other entrepreneurs do the same.
Great. And thank you to the audience for listening. And please share anything you heard or insights that you took from our podcast today with your teams and your peers. And don't forget to subscribe and download the podcast. My producers remind me to share that all the time. So thank you so much. And until next time, Michele, I can't wait to speak with you soon on
Me too. Let's do this workshop. I'm excited.
And that's a wrap. There's another successful episode of the Fractional C-suite Retreat. See our show notes and more episodes at fractionalcsuiteretreat.com. This podcast is sponsored by your CMO, helping organizations grow, save time and money with better marketing strategy and fractional execution. Visit them at yorcmo.com, yourcmo.com. Spelled wrong on purpose.